Okay, welcome everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. Hi, this is Chad McDaniel with Execs in the Know, and I really appreciate your time and listenership for today's session. I got a couple of housekeeping things I want to make sure we go through. A lot of you were at the Coronado event a couple of weeks ago in San Diego. It was great to see all of you. And as we're a couple of weeks away from Thanksgiving, all the best to you and your families and whatever you may be planning. But Thanksgiving is one of my personal favorite times of the year, and I'm looking forward to it. So good news, bad news, I don't know. A couple things. I'm dealing with a head cold. I've got my Kleenex here. Frank, you're dealing with bronchitis, but you're going to hold on there for us. But we're going to get through this. But neither here or there. We've got a very important and timely conversation that I'm quite excited about. So, Frank, thanks for being a power user and hanging with us, dealing a little bit what you've got going on with the bronchitis.
Yeah, no problem, Chad. Thank you for having me today.
All right. Well, we've got Kleenex in hand, and we're good to go. All right. Welcome, everybody. I've got a couple things that we're going to be talking about today, and I'll be introducing our guest speaker here in a second. But really, it's about improving customer experience through the use of digital transformation technologies. We've been hearing about this for a long time as a community. We've been talking about this, but we're going to kind of go behind the scenes a little bit. We're going to talk about some new thinking, new way of thinking, some creative avenues. Frank has done an amazing job to put together some definitions for us. He's also going to help us in some case study stuff. So I really think that this is going to be a great informative discussion. And of course, I'm going to ask for your questions. There is a question box in the platform you'll see. Anything that comes up during the conversation between Frank and I, please put your questions forward. That's how we learn together as a community, is through interactive sharing. So I got a couple things I want to go through. This is my self-plug. Come to Customer Response Summit in Austin. It's our next live gathering for the National Summit. I promise you it's going to be very much about this passion, power, and purpose and the theme. And mark your dates on your calendars for March 1st and 3rd in the new year. We're excited to come to the city of Austin. For you, if you're a first-time listener with Execs in the Know, welcome. We are a corporate CX sharing community. I call it a playbook for the CX leaders, because for us as leaders, sometimes there's not always that playbook. And what we do as a community of about 10,000 of us is we share very unfiltered best practices and how we can streamline and elevate the success of our industry. So welcome to us. If you have not met our board, fantastic group of leaders that really are not only a customer and employee obsessed culture, but really trying to help our industry advance. And as we look forward to mentoring and other future leaderships in our industry. So last thing I'll say before I turn over to you, Frank, and we do some introductions, is for our corporate audience listening, you should join our private online community called Know It All. Just reach out to me, Chad at execsintheknow.com. We have hundreds of your peers across the globe and sharing all sorts of rich conversations, connecting with each other, sharing ideas. Reach out to me. If you're not part of the online community for our corporate group, please join, and we'll be happy to give you some more insights to what that's all about. All right. So Frank Pettinato. Frank, thank you. Did I get that correct on the last name?
Yeah, close, Chad. Pettinato.
Okay,
Frank Pettinato.
You're going to help me out with that. But Frank, I want to say, first of all, thank you for making the time today for our audience and coming to our community. I've had the pleasure of knowing you over the years in the various leadership roles and different things you've done in the space. It's a real blessing that we have you in our industry. I can't thank you enough for what you do and what you have done to this for us in this space over the years. So thank you. It's great to work with you again and see you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Chad, and thank you for the opportunity today. So again, everyone, Frank Pettinato, the CEO of Avantive Solutions. We're a purpose-driven global transformation company um, with our keen focus on healthcare and media and communication clients. So I'm just going to jump into the slides here. So today we're going to chat about digital transformation and hopefully provide some unique kind of definitions and some thinking around how digital transformation can be used in various industries. So one of the things I'm going to cover and discuss is under definitions is enterprise and consumer centric digital transformation, and then how personalization comes into play in digital transformation. Then leveraging the knowledge and the data that we've learned to tailor interactions, and then customizing the conversation using some other technologies and tools such as real-time artificial intelligence. So, a couple little facts and figures here. No surprise that 95% of CX is expected to be driven by artificial intelligence by 2025. We're seeing that in many different ways. I'm sure you're seeing it in your business. We are seeing it in our business. And as consumers, you're probably getting a sense that this is happening out there. 67% of businesses say that they di- must be focused on digital transformation exercises to be competitive. So there's a driver there from the enterprise side. And consumers are willing to share data if they believe that it'll drive to a better experience. So to me, this is a holistic approach in the sense that brands or enterprises believe that it's important, but consumers actually feel that participating in this will be valuable to them. So the state of the industry, why is this important? What problem are we trying to solve? And one of my famous sayings is, is this a solution looking for a problem, or do we really have a solution here for kind of known problems? So one of the, problem statement is access to the information. The information we have and the data we have is not standardized, and more importantly, it's inconsistent. Everyone knows the trials that we all have within our industries, our brands, and our enterprises on kind of standardizing information so that it can be meaningful or we could take action on. Then understanding what is the intent of a digital transformation exercise? What does it really mean? And where do we begin? What's the journey here? And then, what's the success criteria? Not every size fits all. I'm going to give some examples today, on how we solve specific client needs, but by no means is that the extent of all the universe. What we have here is a new platform that we can grow from and a solution set. A lot of it is dependent on your internal systems, capabilities, and technologies. And how do you interact with internal and external partners? Perhaps you're a brand that uses an outsourcer, or perhaps you're a brand that uses multiple outsourcers. There's a lot of internal and external data sources that need to be kind of aggregated and standardized in order to get this full picture that we're trying to develop. So digital transformation, a weighted concept. In my opinion, it's a big umbrella. Um, we are defining it as technologies or digital technologies to optimize its processes and reimagine services so that they're significantly better. And we're going to talk a little bit about how people play into it, technologies play into it, and processes play into it. So I'm going to start off by just kind of giving you a little bit of some thinking around how we think of digital transformation. Because it touches so many parts of businesses, everything from what happens within four walls of a contact center to perhaps how a consumer is actually interacting with technology. We broke it into kind of two categories. The first of which is enterprise centric digital transformation. This is centered around, in this case, we're talking about call center. So we're centered around an agent or a call center. So within the four walls, this could be technology supported by cloud computing, using data and voice analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, interacting with mobile devices, and customer to agent matching. So again, a consumer doesn't necessarily see all this, but it's super relevant to what happens within the call center. And then customer centric digital transformation. This is outwardly facing technology. This is the technology that a consumer is going to use to interact with your brand, such as voice, chat, SMS, email, social media, etc. providing a seamless experience between all these channels, the infamous omni-channel strategy. And then, what I believe is important, and I stand behind this, is it's critical we as an industry meet the consumers where they are. What channels do they choose to interact with? And can we give them a high a high NPS or high customer service unified solution within the channel that they choose? So love my metrics here. So 96% of consumers say that service is crucial to brand loyalty. That's clearly not a surprise. But what we want to talk a little bit about is how to leverage that. So we know that consumers want these interactions to be um, positive and connected to drive this brand loyalty. But how exactly do we do it given the sheer number of consumers we have and the significant amount of data that we have out there? How can we make some personal experiences? We're going to start off with some definitions here. So, machine learning is a form of artificial intelligence using data and algorithms that to mimic the way humans learn. His ability to learn analyze a large amount of structured and unstructured data and automatically detecting patterns in consumer data in this case and predict behavior and automate processes to achieve some desired outcome. Artificial intelligence, in this case, real-time artificial intelligence is a subcategory to that, where real-time compliance and adherence and interaction is happening as the agent is talking to a consumer, patient, or member. And then we're going to talk a little bit about branded calling, which is the ability for us to use a mobile device to project out this information to a consumer in real time, what brand is calling, perhaps a logo, perhaps the reason why we're calling. So we're going to touch a little bit about all these concepts as we go through the rest of today's call. So data is the new oil. We can mine, we could refine it, we can extract it, and ultimately it's going to fuel our industries or fuel our businesses. So smart data, volume, velocity, variety, and value. There's a lot of data. That's the volume. The pace at which we collect data, the velocity, the variety, we're getting data from multiple sources, and the value. What does it mean when we pull this together? How can we extract meaningful insights from this data? Many businesses, if they're like mine, have more data than they possibly can deal with. The question is, how can we refine it in such a way that it becomes actionable? Then source, where do we get this data from? Um, we generate data internally. We can manipulate it and modify data so it's something else. We call it enriching. We can pull data from third party sources. And then the results. The key is to have an actionable insights of the data so that we have a meaningful outcome that impacts the lives of our consumers, patients, or members, and it drives the desired outcome for our enterprises. Another concept that we wanted to talk about is computational social science. And the way to think about this is social science, as we know, is looking at personas, psychometric data on hiring of employees in this case, leadership development, success criteria. So the kind of social aspect of who our consumers are and who our agents are in this case. And then data science, which some of which we talked about, which is being able to extract our own data, pull in third party data such as demographics to develop consumer personas, developing dialing strategies, analyzing the data using machine learning and artificial intelligence, but combining it into this holistic approach that we call computational social science, where we're able to personalize these interactions using kind of a softer social science approach and then this extensive data that we have. So when we think about what the outcome is of this computational social sciences, we are reacting to a buyer's persona or a consumer's persona. we are doing customer to agent matching, where we're basically tying out and connecting a call to the best agent to handle a consumer. We are using voice analytics and advanced analytics, and we are customizing those interactions, right time, right offer, but also making sure that it meets the spirit and the need of the consumer based on their persona.
Frank, I want to jump in here. And by the way, you're doing a fantastic job dealing with the bronchitis. So great job.
Thank you.
On the maturity scale, when we think of, and I'd love to hear from some of our people listening to the audience here, drop something in the question box or chat box to me. But this persona data, buyer behavior, consumer, and this computational social science, where are we really at on the medium of this right now, do you believe, holistically as an industry? What would be your guess and thoughts there?
So I think we're in the early stages. There's a lot of research being done. We've had the uh, pleasure of participating in some university research on this subject, and it's important to understand the value of doing this work, because our goal is to cut through the noise and interact with consumers, members, and patients in a way that's wildly effective. The investment in this and the research and the trials and the error, we believe, is critical. Um, the reason I'm saying we're early is, having tried to do some research and find some sources and resources to help us build our own solution, we didn't really come up with a lot. So we ended up basically starting from scratch and, interestingly enough, contacting research institutions to leverage off of the work that they had actually begun. Um, they themselves, these research institutions, have kind of adopted or started to look at how does an interaction with, for example, a call center drive a desired outcome. Their data sets were limited because of some, they're obviously not call centers; they're universities. But because we deal with tens of millions of calls per month, we've got a vast amount of information. As mentioned earlier, just you know, perhaps
Well,
even more that we can manage. So we're able to then apply some of this work and kind of come up with our own research.
couple of quick thoughts, and I don't get too hung up on this, but
Mhm.
we've been talking a lot in the community. I think a lot of people that are on this call, I'm looking at some of the names and talking about where we have these intersections. And again, to this computational social science piece, is it a data issue? Is it a technology issue? Is it something else? And if we were to have this conversation in 5 years from now, where do we see that maturity index looking? Of course, we'd all say it's going to increase, and no one
Right.
disagrees to that. But I think there are some fundamental things we as a community of CX leaders, we need to continue to sort of trial, get our heads around, be constantly thinking. And again, no one's going to disagree that our consumers want 96% personalized experiences, and
Sure.
we're talking about that forever. But anyhow, it's an interesting concept, and not necessarily a new concept, but I think I really want to ask the community to keep a lens on. And if anyone has any thought or reflection, good or bad, please drop a note in the chat box. I see a couple comments that have come in. But Frank, sorry, I just wanted to throw that out
Oh,
there. Your input.
yeah. I mean, just as I see the trend line continuing, I think it's just it's very important for us to look at the holistic view of how we interact with consumers, members, and patients, because the amount of data we currently have, if addressed or refined properly, as we talked about earlier in the oil analogy, we can drive more favorable personalized outcomes, which I think makes makes a better experience for all involved, the agent and the consumer. So I see more research on this coming through, and I believe it's going to be more common.
And let me just throw a couple of comments that have come in, and then we'll move on.
Yeah,
We have some case
sure.
studies and stuff. Brett, thank you for sharing, and I know you represent a very strong community voice and perspective. Brett was saying that when looking at matching the right agent to the right
Mhm.
customer based on their persona, is the best match agent is currently interacting with another customer, how long would the system optimally wait for that agent to become available before moving to a less matched agent? Excuse me. Great question, and I don't know if there's a rule of thumb or a thought there, but I wanted to interject that to the conversation.
So Brett got to the actual core of the issue, right? So we believe the best strategy is the best agent may not necessarily warrant a long wait time for a consumer. Um, so I mean, I think a short threshold is appropriate, but we don't necessarily see. I mean, depends on the scale of the enterprise or the call center. There isn't quote going to be a best agent. So we typically pull them into cohorts or groups so that a group of agents may match a customer more. The data required to kind of get to that is extensive. It may take 2, 3, 4 months of collecting information. But we're of the opinion that it's best to make the best available agent matching, perhaps with maybe a very small delay if appropriate. If your contact center has short handle times, that's probably more appropriate. But if you're in a healthcare environment or a member services environment where a call may be a little bit longer just because you're trying to address a member's issue, maybe best to just default to the best available agent. But that I think Brett hit on a very strong
Yeah.
question.
I know when you got to this slide, you're going to hit a bit of a tone or a note with the community, Frank. And if I may, I'm just going to throw one more out there, a
Sure.
little bit of a counter to it. And then I know we got to move on because I definitely want to get to the case studies. Paul, thank you. Paul, also one of our great leaders in the community. Great topic and appreciate the insights. But really, a little bit of a counter to this, personalization can be pushed down to a very micro level and cover almost everything. But just because something can be personalized doesn't mean it should, or there's an ROI on personalization for every item. Commentary. The question is, what are the top areas you're hearing from customers on what is most important to them? Reference personalization. Where should companies focus their efforts? Paul, great question. And I know you echo a lot of sentiment in the community of that question.
So people that know me hear this phrase right time, right offer. So the personalization concept is probably more about the value proposition to perhaps a current customer, a prospective customer, or perhaps additional services to a member. But right time, right offer is the level of personalization I believe is relevant, and that could get into the outcome of a right time, right offer could end up being a fairly significant review of the background and a persona of an agent. But the personalization from it's outcome based. So your industry is going to dictate what success looks like. But in my experience, that seems to satisfy most consumers. And we all get spam email or spam phone calls, and I can't help thinking why and the whomever chose to write me an email or called me believed that that offer was going to be relevant to me. So therefore, they wasted their time, and they sure as hell, sure as I was going to say hell, but I guess I can't say that. But sure as hell, they wasted my time. But that's really where I see the value of personalization. I don't know, Chad, if you have a thought on that.
We're a community and we definitely can say hell. And we're all consumers. We get frustrated. We go through different
Right.
experiences. I've tried to cap my feelings many times, but no, I think what we've got to leave this note in as we move on. It's not a one and done, and it's not going to necessarily go away. It's an evolution, and it's going to
Mhm.
continue. And what I'm going to really push our community, Paul, Brett, and many others, is keep sharing your examples forward to what's
Yeah.
being tried, what's the learnings we are seeing, where we're having
Mhm.
different failures. And there's hundreds of us in the community that can do that. So anyhow, it's an evolution, and it's going to continue. We
Yeah.
can't lose sight on. So that's my thought. But I know we've got to move.
No, and just one final comment on Paul's point is over personalization could backfire because you may no information on personalization is going to be perfect, and you could do a misstep. So I've also gotten hyper personalized communications that just were off putting because they didn't quite get it right. So there's a balance here. And I think over time we'll collect enough data to figure out how best to personalize things in order to get a desired outcome. But that was an awesome question. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some examples here and kind of how all this comes together and self-serving because this is what we do. So machine learning in an outbound call center. Um, Anybody on the phone who's either in the outbound business or has vendors that do outbound know that it's incredibly complex. And these days, reaching a consumer member or a patient to actually have an interaction with them is very challenging. There's just, despite STIR, SHAKEN, and other regulatory items, the phones are just inundated with calls, and you're not entirely sure who is calling and why they're calling you. So when we aggregate the tens of millions of calls we make per month over years or many months of information, we could start to develop a pattern. But the sheer volume of information is so significant, no human could do it. So we've kind of defaulted to some machine learning algorithms to do so. And some of the success criteria we look for in this case are, who to call. So propensity model. So if I have a list of, 100,000 uh, prospective customers, I may choose to call some of them more than others simply because of propensity to buy. When to call 'em, do we have a windows or optimal windows that we believe we can reach these folks? How often to call them? That goes back to kind of propensity. We may want to call higher propensity uh, con- prospects a bit more than a lower propensity. Agent matching we talked about, which is in to Brett's example, even more complex in an outbound environment because allocating a call to a specific agent is very complex. Caller ID, should we use branded calling or rich call data to present the name of the brand or the call reason? And what specific script do we want to use? What specific offer? And that goes to my right time, right offer concept that we talked about. And in this specific use case, we use about 35 data points, everything from third party demographic data, data we get from a record, the weather, the holiday, which telecom carrier they're using, prior disposition, had we called them before, what happened, and on and on and on. You could just imagine the sheer number of informations that we could pull into it. And once all that information comes through, we correlate it and basically look to see what of the data drives those desired outcomes, and they get prioritized higher. So when we look at a deeper kind of example of this specific case, in this case we have a demographic profile of this consumer, female, age 35 to 45, household income of 75,000. She lives in the city, married, two children. Well, with that demographic data, I can develop a persona, and based on that persona, we can actually start to craft our personalization. So we know her behavior is career oriented, or we don't know it, but we suspect it based on a persona. She enjoys healthy living, lacks the time for herself, enjoys Netflix, buys quality rather than economical products, and loves going out with friends. So now that we have this model, we'll call it persona, we can build an individual customer experience, an offer. We could decide when we're going to call her, or if she calls us, when should we make sure that we're staffed appropriately. We would match her with an appropriate agent in order to get a desired outcome. We'd customize the script based on what we know about her and what we think will resonate. That's that right time, right offer. And this whole optimization, either an optimization of when we call her or being available when she wants to call us, is an important attribute because we need to be available. It's also channel preference. We talk a little bit about that coming up, making sure that we're interacting with her in the channel that she prefers. So these are kind of things that can come out of segmentation and suppression algorithms using machine learning. So, 80% of consumers are more likely to buy with a personalized experience. So how can we leverage all the data in these predictive models, right? It seems like scary to me, right? We're analyzing consumers and patients and members and saying, how are we going to interact with them? But if the outcome is favorable to the consumer, then I'm actually for it. I think it is the right thing to do. We should collect as much data as legally available, right? There's some compliance issues. And we should tie out third party data in order to make sure that we're interacting with the consumer in a way that they feel appropriate personalization, as we talked about earlier, so that that interaction is much more favorable. The agent matching is another part of it. This basically is going to lead to a lot more successful calls. Honestly, one of the data points we have is agent fatigue is less because an agent is going to say, "Wow, I really had a great day today speaking to consumers I really could connect with." And consumers are going to say, "Wow, I really had a pleasurable interaction with the call center. That person I spoke to really got me." Channel preference. Chad and I talked a little bit about this earlier when we were prepping. Um, I'm a big fan of meeting the customer where they want to be. Uh, I think digital transformation is often looked at on, hey, moving to digital channels. But I think of it as a broader approach because it is holistic. It's everything from what happens within the enterprise to how the consumer interacts it. But, those channel preferences can drive a lot of CSAT. It could actually optimize your call center performance based on spikes in volume and seasonality. And that brand loyalty, if brands are available within the channel a consumer prefers, perhaps they're going to default to them. And, customer churn is going to be reduced. So just keep that in mind as you go down your digital transformation journey. So branded calling, we were an early adopter of this technology, working directly with Google and the three large telecom carriers to do a lot of piloting. And we found some astounding results. So the problem we were trying to solve is 84% of unknown calls are unanswered. We all do it. In Pettinato house, that'd be 100% of unknown calls would be unanswered. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way. But if we could use digital transformation technology, and it goes back to what we talked about, right? We've evaluated the consumer, we've propensity modeled the consumer, we've developed the right offer for the consumer. We still have to get in contact with them. So being able to present the brand logo, or the call reason is invaluable in accomplishing that goal. And some data that we have, and this is a case study I think we're publishing with this webinar, is we've seen a 25% increase in conversion rate. The reason for that is not hard to believe because if I see a brand and I have an affinity for that brand, I'm going to answer the call, not be more predisposed to buy. Transactional net promoter score doubled. That was a shock. We found that consumers who saw the brand were prepared to take the call when we did a post interaction survey we saw a lift that was 2x. And then, of course, because of the conversion rate increases and our efficiency on outbound calling, we saw, a fairly sizable cost reduction in sales. This is an example of customer-centric digital transformation.
And this is an interesting concept to me, and I'd love to hear from the community that's listening right now. Where again, how far down the pipe are we with branded calling? So, for example, I think of my credit card company a lot of times to say American Express. When they're calling me, it shows on my phone as American Express or whatever example. So maybe there's definitely some early adopters, or maybe if my airline was trying to call me back for some reason
Mhm.
based on a ticketing need or change of flight. But it becomes a slippery slope. It's an interesting concept, and I could think of all sides of it. Is there certain industries that this is very important, relevant? My healthcare company needs to talk to me. Are there certain industries that this may not be? I don't. Just want to get your opinion, Frank, on this. And I know a couple questions are coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think industry agnostic. I think any brand that wants to get in contact with their constituents or their partners or their members or patients or consumers, it's important because you're now building that brand affinity where people see the brand is contacting them. And I like you may get an 800 number coming in from a credit card company or a bank, and even if I reluctantly answer it, I'm skeptical on who they are. So I think that comfort level, we've seen data through some of our voice analytics and some other data where the interactions are just so much better when the consumer knows who's calling or has some level of confidence on who's calling. An area that we feel strongly about is interacting with our seniors. I know I tell my parents not to answer any call that they don't know who it's from, but there may be urgent phone calls from a pharmacy, a doctor, a health plan, and if it could be branded, I think it may not alleviate 100% of the concern, but it sure does make that risk level lower. Now, there's a broader discussion here on the regulatory environment, on controlling that brand and make sure that there's standardization. And I work very closely in that with those regulatory groups and kind of standardizing this. But generally, this is available. Any brand that's using it have seen positive results, everything from higher live answer rates to more outcomes. But I think it's about trusting the call. It's about trust. I
Yeah.
think the consumers are in a situation right now where they're completely inundated. They're reluctant to answer the phone, and even if they do answer the phone, they're still skeptical. So I could give you a very specific case study that that I like. So we have a customer that's a national pet recovery company. Obviously, many of us have pets, and they're basically like children to us, and nothing would be so imaginable as perhaps losing your pet. But if you put a chip in your pet and you subscribe to your pet recovery service and the pet happens to be found by a shelter or the police or whomever, they're going to try to get a hold of you. And in this case, they contact you from an 800 number. They've communicated to you to say, "Hey, please load this into your phone. We're going to call you from this 800 number." It's perhaps even advertised on your bill every month, but in a frantic panic of looking for your pet, the last thing you want to do is answer an 800 number coming to your cell phone. So we elected to brand it. So we branded those calls, and contact rate, which in this case is over 4 attempts, went up 25%. So these people 25% more pet owners answered that call early on, which allows us to get that pet back to them first further. The live answer rates increased by 15%. Some of the anecdotal data we heard were people basically saying, "I wasn't going to answer this phone, but when I saw your name came up, I did." And one funny story was the pet recovery service called a pet owner and was saying that they had found their pet, but she hadn't known that the pet was lost. So that was kind of an interesting one. But nonetheless, this works, and it's an example, Chad, like you said. I mean, you can imagine how this could be projected to a pharmacy or a healthcare company, a doctor, any service that you absolutely have to get in contact with the customer, member, or patient for any reason, not just a pet recovery. So we're excited about this. The data that we had here was just amazing. The satisfaction level of the consumers is high, and we see other use cases like this every day, and we do nothing but always try to recommend this. I'm gonna move on to kind of another
Yeah.
example of
And we got a couple more slides and what I wanted to say, and we're going to get to some Q&A here. One thing that I can tell you we all agree on as CX leaders, we do agree we love our pets. So
yep, there you go.
no distraction on that.
Yeah, that's good.
So let
So, yeah, go ahead, Chad.
go ahead. Let's on the next slide. There's a couple more things we want to call out, and then I want to get into some shared discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, real-time artificial intelligence, we talked a little bit about customizing the offer, and that agent customer or customer agent matching. An example of enterprise level digital transformation is kind of a co-pilot. So listening to the call as it's happening and using real-time artificial intelligence to drive the call, basically direct the call, give the agent check marks on if they've covered issues, giving them language to overcome objections, making sure that if there's some compliance language verbatim that's read, that it's being read properly. But equally important is being able to, in real time, provide a customized offer based on what is either said on the phone compared to the demographic data. So this is really exciting technology. We've had this up and running for about almost 2 years now, and both the agents love it, and obviously the outcome of our interactions are just more favorable. Platform that we developed actually won a Stevie Award last year, so we're excited about that. We were able to increase sales. Um, we were able to increase the customer experience scores of those interactions. We were able to reduce handle time, conversion rates, and most important for in this specific client group is real-time compliance adherence with verbatim and other government regulated language. So it's been a win-win, and that's just another example of using artificial intelligence in enterprise level digital transformation. Whoops, I think I messed up the slide there. Okay. So I'm going to move on to another example, Chad. And this is my last example, unless you had another question.
No,
Okay.
let's go to that example, and then we're going to get into some conversation.
So conversational chatbots are a big piece of digital transformation. In the category of eating our own dog food, we use some conversational chatbot to develop a platform to interact with candidates that are applying for jobs at our company. So through after a candidate applies to a job through Indeed and fills in an application, for example, they'll basically instantaneously start getting a favorable interaction with a chatbot. Chatbot basically feels like a human interaction, operates 24/7, and really it's validating a lot of the data that we've collected during that application process. The outcome of which is trying to drive the next step, which is an interview. And we offer multiple choices. You could do a phone interview, you could come on site for an interview, depending on the geography. Our significant work at home would preclude that. But one thing that we're super excited about is you can actually offer a video interview. And that video interview can happen real time, where they go into a queue, kind of like a doctor's on demand, and you're played a video while they're waiting that answers probably most of the basic questions and pop your in real time with a recruiter, or they could choose to schedule the video interview at a time that's convenient for them. All this is fully automated, and the goal is to take that traditional hiring delay of they applied for the job, we had to call them, they had to wait till they called back, or we didn't get a hold of them, and we basically use this digital transformation technology to streamline this. It's frictionless. It's a pleasurable experience for the candidate, and our high volume recruiting can be done by a minimum number of resources, and those resources can be global. So we could have people in Mexico or India or anywhere in the world being able to do the interviews here in the U.S. in order to execute a hiring. So just another example of digital transformation in use, using conversational chatbot and video interviewing techniques. So I was going to jump into a look ahead, but Chad, curious if you wanted to.
Always like to look ahead, but before we look ahead, I want to go back to some points that we've discussed. And
Okay.
by the way, Frank, big thumbs up. You're dealing with bronchitis, trying to get to the doctor this afternoon. You've done an amazing job. Let me talk a little bit, take a sip of water there. I love our community, and I'm going to call out, I'm going to ask Heather, Kimberly, Brett, Paul, Ori, who I have high respect just in our community. At the end of the day, we've talked a lot of concepts. throughout this conversation with Frank about enterprise-centric, customer-centric, data is the new oil, social science, buyer personification, branded calling, and 96% of consumers prefer personalization. But I'd love to hear, what is the problem we're ultimately trying to solve as CX leaders, as we've been talking about through the entire conversation here. I'd love to get your thoughts, if you would. At the end of the day, what is the problem we need to solve, we continue to need to solve? So drop a note in the chat box if you could, please. I'd appreciate it. Do it as a favor, Chad. I'm dealing with a cold too. Frank, as they're doing that, tell us a little bit more about your business, Avantive Solutions, and I'm going to put this
Sure.
into context. So real quick for our listeners today, I'm going to give you a chance to just quickly tell us about your company, and then I've got some questions.
Yeah, fair enough. So Avantive Solutions, a global BPO. We operate in North America, both on-site and remote, work at home. Latin America, Asia Pacific, and a new partnership in South Africa. So we're very excited about it. We don't just serve U.S. clients; we have global clients as well, UK, New Zealand, etc. So we do think of ourselves as a global company, and um, our focus area is primarily healthcare. We've got a deep experience in healthcare. Our management team is built up of healthcare professionals. We've got a large client space in communications and media. Much of the technology that we talked about here today is being applied towards the technology and media clients. Um, I'd say what sets us apart or what makes us different or what our special sauce is we do live by a purpose-driven culture. Our purpose is to delight our clients, develop and engage our employees, and support our community. And we support our communities that we operate in through a non-for-profit that is called realpurpose.org. And that non-for-profit's funded by our employees. And we just do a lot of great things for all the communities that we operate in the U.S. and globally. The second part of what I think makes us special or different is our innovation. We do invest heavily in innovation. We do pilots and testing, and we partner with universities. So to the and it's something I'm passionate about. I'm an engineer by training, so I love technology. I love innovation, but more importantly, how that allows us to touch our consumers, patients, and members to make a more personalized and better experience, Chad.
So thank you for that overview, and love the social cause and piece, and that's something we align really close to with as a community also. So keep that moving forward, Frank. And I asked the question to give some context because I'm assuming that one of the things you've identified this as an opportunity organization over the years is working hand in hand with your clients. Would love to understand, were there any fail points? If we could do it differently, we would have done this. You don't have to name the client, but just
Sure.
really what was the situation, and some learnings that you can take, and then some comments have come in. I'll make sure I share here shortly.
Yeah, I think the data piece is the key. So we started building some fairly sophisticated machine learning algorithms based on some learning data or data sets that we had on a point solution. So we were trying to solve a specific use case. What became clear to us is we tried to take those models that we built and apply it towards a broader set of customer needs or customer demands. The data didn't behave. The data didn't line up. So we ended up having to go through a more of a more thoughtful process of kind of standardizing all our information in order for it to kind of behave in the way that our models wanted it to be. And honestly, it was kind of one of those scenarios where we had a lot of early results because we were solving a point solution, but then when we tried to scale it across the whole enterprise, we basically stagnated. We've recovered from it. We understand that data standardization or the diversity of data and the ability for us to kind of mine it and groom it and cajole it to get what we want out of it is a big part of this, as I'm sure everybody can imagine. But that was kind of an eye-opening experience of how um, the complex the data set is the data universe is and how to get it groomed in such a way that we can use these sophisticated algorithms to drive outcomes. So I'm not sure I would do anything different. It was probably just more of a learning. Um, you know, but these are
Well,
early adopters tend to find that. That's part of the
well,
game.
Frank, I disagree with you. Data always behaves. It never gets unruly. I'm teasing, teasing, teasing. But data, yeah, the good old data dilemma. I'd ask the audience, and I said, at the end of the day, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And again, Paul, thank you. And I think it simplifies some things in the context of this conversation in some ways I want to leave us going forward. So Paul said, that really it's the fact that customers want to be treated as a number. And I remind that all the time to myself as a customer or dealing with people in the community. But really, one way to show that we value them, to demonstrate that we know them through personalization and some of the things. And it can have some pitfalls and downside and other pieces. But I truly believe that for the majority of us in customer leadership, we are really trying to navigate these waters and looking at thoughtful, innovative, and trial by error if we have to, but we're learning together in that sense. So before we look forward, Frank, I'm going to just ask you in summary to this group, would there be one call out, one advocacy, something you really want to encourage us to continue to keep in mind in this journey as we look at the marriage of digital transformation, human, employee, customer, all the things that we're grappling with? It's going to be an exciting next 10 years for us as an industry, but would there be one thing that you really want to advocate to this group before we look forward?
Yeah, Dale Carnegie says, "There's nothing, no sound as sweet as that of your own name." So I took that quote and kind of applied it to my thoughts around personalization. Um, so just like if you're meeting somebody and you remember their name, and that tends to bring the delight of that interaction, that's what we need to think about every transaction that we have, whether it's outbound or inbound. And in this case, we're kind of expanding the concept of what's in a name to that right time, right offer, making sure that the interaction um, the interactions are favorable, positive, and drive the desired outcome that not only the brand has, but one that the consumer will leave favorable. Because at the end of the day, we do surveys, we do CSATs, we do TNPS scores. So so it's kind of a broad concept, and I think it's a journey. There's no destination here, but I think the fact that we think about personalization and that it is important and that people are not treated like numbers is a great starting point, because it's very easy, given the volume of phone calls that we get, both inbound and outbound, that these individuals or the people that we're contacting are just numbers. And we have the most unpredictable of all animals, of all beasts in the world, which is humans working for us. So training them, making sure they understand that every interaction is a person on the other line, or a senior, for example. um, there's some sensitivity there. So giving these tools and techniques to the agent on the desktop helps them become better at interacting with a broad set of consumers, members or patients, including that customer agent matching.
No question and amen. And it's a whole nother conversation about employee
Yeah.
success we could drive to. Okay, Frank, I'm going to leave you with this. We're going to all write this down. We're making a prediction. So if we had the same conversation in 5 years, we're looking ahead. What do you see would be different in this conversation, or where do you think we're going to be at in 5 years when it comes to the topic of discussion today? Any prediction?
So I think digital transformation is a big umbrella, will be broken down into kind of more bite-sized chunks. I advocate the definitions that we came up with on enterprise and consumer-based digital transformation. I think that kind of these broad concepts are going to be refined into actionable, more defined next steps and actions related to how brands interact with consumers. I think the regulatory environment's gonna be interesting as well. Chad, on the branded calling and the RCD standards for um, uh, the delegate certificates so that we can regulate that environment and we can provide more rich interactions through mobile devices to consumers. I'm looking for that to happen as well, because I think that'll make all our jobs a lot easier if we can, if consumers literally will not answer the call unless it's branded, because that standards are those standards have been set. Um, on an inbound call, I think the channel preference, we've been on this omni-channel journey for quite a while, and many of us have achieved it, I'm sure, but not all of us have. And I really believe meeting the consumers where they're at is so critical. But and you touched on it earlier, making sure our agents are successful using some of these tools and techniques is so critical because they are interacting with our consumers, our patients, our members. And we want those. Everybody wants to wake up every morning and do an awesome job, but it's not as easy as we all think. It's a challenge. So these artificial intelligence tools aren't meant to be scary. I think what we want to do is make sure that we humanize them and make sure that everyone involved, consumers and agents alike, know that they're here to help. One thing that we do is, and we didn't talk about it, but we actually give most of our technology kind of human names. Our artificial tool is called Artie, and our machine learning tool is called Melissa, so that it's humanized and people don't look at it as being scary.
I like that. That's really cool. And um, again, these predictions are, it's going to be interesting. We'll put them in the time capsule and maybe pull them back out and listen to this. I've done this in the past too, so it's always fun to hear that. Well, Frank, we want to let you get off to the doctor, and
Okay.
I really appreciate you coming and giving us some thought leadership and shared insights from what you've seen. Folks in the community, do check out Frank's organization. They're good people over there, and I know Frank is so willing to share any observations, best practices, or insights or data points. And Frank, I ask you to continue to be close to us in the community. Um, on closing here, do get involved. You're not in this journey alone. Be part of Execs that Know. We are a real community with thoughtful insight, unfiltered best practice sharing. We bring leaders like Frank into our ecosystem to kind of share some of best practice and elevate the learning and sharing. So I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Frank, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you for spending some time with us. And on behalf of everyone here at Execs that Know, Frank, we thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate the time. Take care,
Okay.
everyone.
Yes, this will now conclude today's session. Stay well, reach out anytime, chatexecsknow.com, and thank you for your listenership.